Austin McConnell posted this video about his self-published book being a financial disaster, which means the accountant in me is just itching to do a post-mortem of what exactly happened. Austin does do a pretty good reflection of what went wrong, but there are like 5 other big mistakes that Austin made that he does not seem to be aware of at all. So I went and wrote like a book in the comment section of his video. Hey guys, it's Deborah and welcome back to my channel where we talk about the business side of self-publishing. In my opinion, Austin did 3 things right. First off, he went into self-publishing with the right attitude.
I saved up to do this knowing full well that it might not work out.
Which is great because as we know on this channel, publishing is gambling. If you're new here and you're not sure why, make sure you check out this video where I explain it in detail. Second being is Austin went into this tracking all of his expenses.
My total financial investment in putting this book together was $5,103.24.
And having some sort of expectation around his potential revenue.
If just 1% of my audience picked it up, that would be 11,000 copies sold, which would be more than enough to break even on my initial investment.
Now he did mess a few things up with his revenue expectations, which I'll talk about a little bit later in this video. That said, Austin was at least thinking about how he was going to break even, and that's the important part. Finally, Austin went in knowing exactly what he could do and could not do at a professional level.
I am a man of few abilities, so I got some help.
He made the decision to invest and outsource all of those areas where he lacked the expertise to do it himself. And that's important to publishing a quality book. Now, let's talk about the 5 major mistakes Austin made. Number 1, since my comment last night, I've actually changed my mind. I think the first mistake Austin made, which is common for many people who are new to self-publishing, is focusing way too much on the author in self-published author. As we've talked about before on this channel, writing the book is the easy part. The hard part is what comes afterwards with the actual publication and marketing of your book. In my opinion, if you want to make a full-time income from being a self-published author, you need to spend more time focusing on this publish part and less time on the author part. Now, I'm not saying to not work on your craft of storytelling and prose and all of that stuff. You absolutely have to be producing good work. However, at some point, your ability to craft a satisfying story and produce a satisfying book is going to be good enough. You may not win any literary awards or anything like that, but you're going to get to the point where people are going to be happy to pay for your book and think that it is fairly priced for what they get. And that's what you should be aiming for if you are applying the MVP strategy to being a self-published author. And because of this misplaced focus on the author part in self-published author, Austin spent all of his research time doing things like this.
I immersed myself in author YouTube. Ellen Brock, Michelle Schusterman, Alexa Dunna, Natalia Lee, Daniel Green, Brandon Sanderson, Lars Martinson, and others that I'm sure I'm forgetting.
These guys are all cool people, and as you know, Brandon Sanderson is my author goal. Here's where Austin should have been spending his time instead. The second mistake Austin made was focusing way too much on his revenue assumptions instead of his break-even point.
If I sold 11,000 copies, I would make my initial investment back and then some.
First off, there are a few things he should have done differently in coming up with his revenue assumptions. He should have based his assumption on some actual data. When you're doing a title P&L and trying to estimate the total lifetime sales of a new title, normally the first thing that you look at is your comparable titles in the market and how many copies they are selling. You don't just look at your subscriber base and not consider the type of book that you're writing and the type of audience that you have and not even consider whether there are any overlaps between those two things at all.
I figured at the bare minimum, I could convince like 1% of that audience to buy a copy of the book. That's realistic expectations, right?
1% is just a number. Like, you don't have any basis to tell whether that is actually a low or a high conversion rate. And as Austin found out,
Neva's story has sold 208 copies, netting me about $896.42.
painfully, it was a pretty high estimate.
I priced the book so that I would make just under $5 in royalties for each copy sold.
$12.99 for a paperback and $4.99 for an ebook of a novella, which typically is 50,000 words or less. That seems really high. Full disclaimer here, this genre is not one that I read, so take anything I say about the pricing of this particular book in this genre with a grain of salt. That seems really high for a first-time author with their first book. But that could just be my sci-fi fantasy biases talking. And if you compare it to other bestsellers in this category, Austen's book is shorter, more expensive, and written by an author with a lesser track record compared to any of these other authors. I'm guessing that potential readers who might actually love his book are not buying it simply because it is comparatively not a good deal. What Austen should have been focusing on was figuring out how many copies he had to sell in order to recoup his original investment cost. Based on the numbers he's given, he would need to sell about 1,050 copies of his paperback in order to recoup all of his investment. Now, that's actually totally doable in self-publishing if you've written the right book for the right audience and you have the right cover and the right blurb, which brings me to my next point. Your cover and your blurb each matter just as much as your book. Despite the saying, we all do it. It is human nature. And when you're running a business, you quickly learn to just shrug and say, it is what it is, and just move on and deal with it. Let's talk about this cover. This cover is a nice piece of art. Is it a good cover for this book in these specific Amazon categories that he's chosen? No, because it does not fit stylistically with any of the top selling books in these categories, and that is a bad thing. A cover is important because it is a visual promise of the kind of story that you're going to get. And if you look at the covers in these particular categories that Austen has chosen, it is very clear what kind of story a reader is going to get by clicking on that cover. If you look at Austen's cover, it is promising very, very different things, and that's not going to do well. And the title is not doing Austen any favors either. Just look at how bland the title is in comparison to the other titles in this particular genre. Let's assume someone does actually click through to the product page of this book. What is the first thing they're going to look for? The blurb. And this blurb is not a good blurb. This blurb is all about the author and his grandmother. Two people that, unless you're a subscriber of Austen's YouTube channel or you come across his work in other places, you have no idea who they are and therefore you don't actually care. The only thing in the blurb that is even related to what the story is about is this generic statement here. Compare that to the blurbs of these other bestsellers in the same categories. Can you see how those blurbs give you a very clear idea of what kind of story you'd be in for if you bought this book, and of trying to draw you in by giving you a hint of the conflicts and the characters in this story? Austen's blurb is not doing any of that stuff. Now, let's assume this prospective reader has given the author the benefit of the doubt and gone, okay, well, the blurb doesn't tell me anything that I want to know. Let me click on the look inside preview here. What happens then? Right. At this point, I am not going to spend any more time scrolling through 2 pages of a foreword, which, by the way, why is there a foreword in a novella? The kind of stuff in this foreword, typically you see going in the acknowledgements or dedication section of the book, which also exists in this book. So I'm pretty confused. Contrast this to how every single other top seller in this category is handling that look inside feature. When you click on that look inside feature, you are taken to the very first page of the story, where you can make a judgment based on that opening sentence, that opening paragraph, that very first chapter, whether you want to read any more of the book. I have bought books from self-published authors based on these look inside features alone. The sad thing is, Austen spent about $150 on Amazon ads, and because of these mistakes, I'm fairly confident that most of that $150 has gone completely to waste. The only reason you would be buying this particular book is if you already know who Austen is.
My channel's target demographic is males aged 18 to 34, and I was trying to sell them a book meant for middle grade girls.
While Austen's first self-published book may have turned out to be a financial disaster, the good news is the story doesn't have to end that way. Most of the mistakes he's made are totally fixable. And here's how I would do it. First off, write a better blurb. The new blurb should tell people why Austen's book is awesome and why they should buy it. At minimum, they need to know what kind of story this is, who the protagonist is, and what kind of problems they're trying to overcome. Secondly, I would move all of this stuff at the front right to the very back, where people are only going to see it once they've made it all the way through the book and they're interested to know more about who the author is, why he wrote the book, what his inspiration was, all of that stuff. And once that's done, I would fix that look inside feature and make sure that the very first thing any prospective buyer sees when they click on it is the first page of the first chapter. The next thing I would do is change the title, and I would change it to something that is more evocative of what the story is about. Again, if you look at these other bestsellers, they have very evocative titles, and several of them actually put a lot of specific keywords into their title, which increases the likelihood that the right readers are going to find their books. I would come up with 2 or 3 possibilities and test them out with beta readers, Facebook ads, whatever else, just to see which one people actually believe is the better title. Finally, this is the most painful and most expensive step, but I would actually get a new cover. I know this is something that nobody ever wants to hear, especially if you've already spent a considerable amount of time and money on the existing cover, but it is so important to get the right cover to make sure that the right kind of readers are finding your book and clicking through to it. And it's not like the old cover is going to go to waste or anything. You can still keep it as an exclusive reader magnet or a bonus download or something. But unfortunately, it is just not the right cover for this kind of book. If I were Austen, I would be doing all 4 of these things because the first 3 doesn't cost anything other than probably a day's worth of my time, maybe like $50 of Facebook ads or something. For the 4th one, you can get very good covers done in the range of $100 to $300. If you factor in these extra costs, Austen would probably have to sell 1,200 paperbacks in order to recoup his investment, which is a totally doable number if you've written the right book for the right audience. What do you guys think? Do you agree with my assessment? Let me know in the comments because I'd love to hear from you. If this video was useful, please give it a like and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more videos like this on the business side of self-publishing. See you in the comments.